but it's harder if we get athletes who have really been through a very, very demanding juniors. I love people that row in the spring. I love those programs. We row in the spring. I mean, if people want to row in the fall as they get older, have at it. But if they come in and they're cross country runners, they're hockey players, they're soccer players, they've done all these different things and they still want to come explore rowing, it's like, that's great. And I think in high school to get that balance, that's great. Like, we used to applaud for sport athletes, and now it's really hard for some kids to be for sport athletes because sometimes they're being told, hey, if you don't do this year round, you're not going to be able to be successful. And I disagree with that.
With that, you ready to rock and roll?
Let's go.
Cool. All right. Well, for everyone listening, I have Kari Hughes here, who is the head coach of Washington College. Was a longtime coach and a great, someone who's been highly recommended by a lot of coaches out there to kind of get on the show, because actually I know Kari from coaching education myself, because she actually was, one of the lead coaches for the USRowing level 3 cohort that I just finished up last June. So that's kind of where I got to, put a name to the face, but also figured I would just reach out and see if we can get you on here and dive a little bit into coaching, development, athlete development, you name it. Also a little bit about what you have going on at Washington College this fall. But Kari, before we get started, I got a couple questions for you, kind of a couple two-part question for you. So number one, just give us a brief introduction on your coaching experience, how you got into this. And then also, to my understanding, you actually rowed at the Naval Academy, you graduated from Navy, and I'd be curious for you, can you talk a little bit, after you give a little bit of an introduction on your coaching, but I'd be really curious to hear from you how you feel that experience rowing at the Naval Academy has shaped this career trajectory for you, and what you have actually brought into your coaching from your experiences rowing at Navy, and then the things that come after that with service and so on and so forth. But two-part question, right? So give us a little bit about your intro, how you got into this with coaching. You can also talk a little bit about what you have going on, with Washington College as you guys get ready for the fall season. But then the second layer to that is, I'd be curious to hear from you, because obviously a lot of people, when you see that, you instantly put it into a category of, wow, that's amazing. Like that's obviously rowing at the Naval Academy and how that has branched off into a coaching career. Describe a little bit about both of those for us, and then we'll get started with some fun topics.
Yeah, no, great. And Kevin, thank you so much for having me. I perused the people you've had on before, and like, whoa, those were some great series that you have. So, yes, I've been coaching. Gosh, I started coaching right after I graduated from the academy. Probably like my senior year of rowing. I was like watching my coaches, and I was like, that looks pretty cool. But again, I was at the Naval Academy, and so we were going off. I ended up going supply corps, which is kind of the business side of the Navy. But it has a 6-month school that goes to it, and they had a few different dates. So I was lucky enough to get the December date. So I had off from May to December, got stationed at the academy, stationed at the boathouse, and then ended up coaching the novice group that came in that year, working with a Navy commander, Wendy Lawrence, who then went off and became an astronaut. So you can imagine, like, just all that I got just from working with her. As far as leadership, professionalism, how to handle a group of people, and fell in love with it. I fell in love with the coaching part. I felt like I still had training I could do. I certainly was not the college athlete that you would look at and go, oh man, she should try out for the national team. I was kind of the athlete that you're like, oh, why does she think she could make the national team? But I was really lucky enough to run into a bunch of great coaches. And I think a lot of times we tell these stories, right? And it's like, oh, and then this person coached me. And then, I started working with this person, and it's this long line of coaches. And that I think really, really got me not stuck into coaching, but it was like, that's what I knew I wanted to do. And so I was able to mix it up. I mixed it up a lot with being in the Navy, which wasn't the easiest thing. But I think like anything, and we talk to our athletes here at Washington College, like if you want something, you figure out how to make it work. You don't worry about the how-tos necessarily. You just start doing it, and those kind of figure themselves out if it's what you really want to do. So I was training, I was in the Navy, and I was coaching. I ended up meeting my husband. He came down from Penn. He'd been a lightweight coach, the lightweight freshman coach at Penn, and then he came down to take the Navy lightweights. And we were dating. We dated probably for about a year, and then we got married. And so then whatever team he was coaching was kind of the team I was coaching. I would come in. So it was a great way to learn coaching. I was working with lightweight men, and then he moved over to the heavyweight plebes and did that, and then over to the women's side. And that's where he stayed for the rest of his career. And then I kind of came in and out again as I was training, and then as I was having a family. Just being able to, I think looking at it, I'd say it's never a traditional. I don't think anyone has a traditional arc of their career. But it's one of those things, again, if you want to do it, you can really make it happen. And then Mike Davenport back in 2015, my husband was retiring from Navy. And the very next day I saw an ad on Row 2K that Davenport up here at Washington College was looking for an assistant coach. Applied for it, came in, didn't really realize I was going to interview. I thought I was just coming to look at the place, interviewed, and the next day got the position, got a chance to come up here. And we had always admired Washington College. It's only about 50 miles away from Navy. Being a Division III, very, very much like Navy. It's a student athlete, which of course everything is, but at Navy, there's a lot of demands on your time, and you can't really necessarily work at the same level time-wise as, maybe a different D1. And D3, obviously, it's kind of baked into the process that we're making sure that we're putting the student ahead of the athlete, but still providing, incredibly competitive, we would say, co-curricular experience. And so I've been here now, I think 9 years. I think I'm in my 10th, and I always think maybe it's a good thing. It's a good sign when you don't really know how many years you've been in a place, because then it's probably really a lot like home.
And what so you've been at Washington College since I think, right? So I have here like 2016,
Yep.
right? So yeah,
Yep.
so coming up on 10 years. And what's like so for you guys as you just get started, like give us a little bit of understanding of, okay, well, it's the fall season. We talked a little bit about it off, right before we started recording, but about the fall and the team and the development, or what you're focusing on here in the fall as you get ready for a couple of races coming up here, right? Notably
Yep.
taking a 4 up to the head of Charles. Talk a little bit about like, okay, over the last coming up on 10 years, right? We'll just call it 9 for now, right? 9 years. Like, how has the team, how is that? How have you, like, what's the evolution of the team been like? Give us a little understanding of what you have going on this fall. And to my understanding, I was poking around a little bit. I've never been down there, but you guys have some pretty, great facilities with the boathouse and things like that. Like, give us a little bit of an understanding of, okay, like here in the fall, can't believe it's already October. We have races coming up. Like, what's the team, what's the dynamic on the team like at this phase of the new year?
Right. Yeah. Fall is always such a great foundational time. We're just, having that good chat. I believe so strongly in the fall being foundational, being able to, especially we're probably like 50-50 as far as recruited athletes and walk-ons from campus. And then looking at our All-Americans that we have, the banners all hung up in the boathouse. You see pretty much a 50-50 mix there as well, of what we're able to produce from the program. And the support that we have here at Washington College from the administration and the athletic department is amazing. We have 2 boathouses. We have a boathouse that has only boats in it, so we call it the Shell House. And then we have our newest building, and it came online in 2018. And it's athlete athlete centric. It's got our locker rooms, it's got the practice facilities, it's got a room full of ergometers, which is my favorite room. I'm not quite sure if it's everybody's favorite room. And we have a tank. And that's great because we get a lot of high schools and junior programs that'll come in, and masters over the winter. But we're also able then to take our novices and right away put them in a very stable environment, teach them the stroke. One of our novice coaches has been here 20 years, and what she loves to do is coach novices and teach. So we have a really great teaching environment, that permeates everything that we do. I always say that as rowing coaches, we're really teachers, and we just choose rowing as our instrument to teach rowing, obviously, but then all those life lessons. And that's the neat thing. We just did a 50th celebration for women's rowing. We're the first women's varsity sport at Washington College, and it started in 1974. So we had a big celebration, brought a lot of alums back. We had about 150 people here, and we're able to hear from the founding members, like they call themselves, the Title IX pioneers, being able to really to latch onto that. But then, so you could see those class of, 74, 75, talking with our athletes that are like class of 28 now it is for our freshmen. And you realize you're still doing the same thing, right? You're out there working together, trying to make boats go fast, but you're making yourself into better people by doing that. And in the fall, for us, we work hard at really building the foundation and the fundamentals. We're never going to have the biggest, strongest, fastest kids in the country. So what we really work hard to do is really take really good people and make them into really good technical rowers, who know how and enjoy how to pull hard and to race and to be competitive. So that's kind of the overarching themes that we stress in the fall. We're always looking for a very collaborative environment, and I think the more we evolve as coaches, I was just talking with one of the coaches in the boathouse and talking about how we were coached maybe back in the 70s, the 80s, things like that, and it's really different, right? The athletes are much smarter, right? They have access to a lot more information, and they want more information, and they're able to do a lot more with the information. But it's really challenging as a coach, right, to be able to continue to provide all of that to them in this time of information. So for us, again, on Division III has had some exciting changes since COVID. Once we went through COVID, they took us from a 19-week look to 114 days. So instead of having to start our fall season and hold on to it until we were ready to be done, which I think typically was 6 weeks for a lot of programs, we're able to go with days, and we're able to really be able to craft a good schedule for the student athletes. We can be responsive to a heavier academic load and take a couple of days off, make the season last a little bit longer. So we can do, right, we're going to go ahead of Charles. We're going to take a 4. We go about every 2 years, which keeps me sane. It's great up there, but it can be a lot, and it gives those athletes something really, really good to be training for in the summer and competing with each other to get up to, because that's quite an event up there. And then we finish off with head of the school, and we'll do that. We'll take our novices. This is the first year we'll take our novices, but we have a big novice class. We've got about 13 athletes that have walked on and stayed. And so we're gonna figure out some great races for them. And as you know, the school is a great place to race, and just the pageantry and all the excitement that is head of the school. That'll close out our fall season for us.
Very cool. And that's actually because I remember when I was looking up, a little bit about the university or the college and stuff like that. Like it's a small school, and to have a walk-on class of 13 athletes at this stage of the fall, like that's really solid. And I really want to dive into a little bit about the walk-ons and the fundamentals that you guys put a lot of emphasis on here in the fall. But one of the things that I would love to kind of get a little bit of just your perspective on is you've referenced it a lot, but you've referenced the coaches that helped guide you in this process. the people that you were able to learn from. You also referenced that we are teachers first, kind of coaches second in many ways, right?
Hmm.
Like our job is really to not only teach the motion of the rowing stroke, so on and so forth, how to train, but it's also the life lessons and leadership and all those other qualities that athletes, all those intangible qualities that athletes can learn to help guide them for the rest of their career and whatever avenue they decide to pursue. And I want to bring it back to, because this is how obviously we got connected, but coaching education and where like broad or expand a little bit on that understanding or on that fact of teachers versus coaches and how you feel, where you feel coaching education fits into things. Because I'd be curious to hear, right? Obviously, whether it's through the USRowing level 3 or it's through just other ways that individuals can expand their knowledge on how to be a better communicator, how to be a better leader, how to be a better coach. Talk to me a little bit about your feeling of, okay, coaches in the role of teachers and how that is something that you feel is, something that you model your coaching off of or live your coaching by.
Hmm.
Just dive a little bit deeper into that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think for me, it started again. I spent a lot of time in my husband's launch before we were even dating, because he was like this new, fresh coach coming in from Penn, and he was a teacher, right? So he taught fifth grade, I think, and then he hustled over to the boathouse and coached the lightweights. And I think you find that in the ranks, right? There's a lot of people who are teachers and coaches. And his mentor was Stan Bergman, and that's where he got his coaching career. And like, right, anyone who knows Stan, it's like that's what Stan is he's a teacher of character, of life, and he does it through rowing. So it's just always, I think, so interesting when you see the lineage of things as they just pass from coach to coach, and you can look up at where that all came from. But sitting in his launch was really impactful for me, because he was the first coach. I think I had great coaches before that, don't get me wrong, but I think I didn't know enough to really even be thinking about what they were saying. But I was listening to him because I wanted to be a good coach, and so I was listening to him and listened to a coach that really worked to understand the person and to understand who they were and why they were doing what they were doing, even just at the Naval Academy. Like, he was so interested in why anybody would go to the Naval Academy, and he was just thrilled to be there. Uh, and watching how he did that, and then having those discussions, really led me down that path. And then I think for me, then trying to become a national team athlete, I really looked at the coaching as an education. And it's interesting. Obviously, I'm very involved in the formal education, and I believe very strongly. And I love the fact that we're getting our sport to be more professionalized in the education part, because I was lucky enough to stumble onto people that I could sit, and I had the opportunity to sit in their launch and to ask those questions, but not everybody has that kind of access. And so where do you get that, right? Where do you get just that foundational knowledge? Like we give our athletes, we don't just hand them an oar and say, hey, go figure that out. But when we look back at coaching, somebody would come and be really interested and they would volunteer. How often do we give them a megaphone and we give them a boat and we give them the newest athletes that we have and we say, here, go figure it out. You'll be fine. And they don't have something to fall back on. So that's where I think, I'm involved with level 2, which is, we see 30 some coaches a month, which is great for me because I always learn something from them. I learn something from the different coach instructors. And then level 3, right? When it's a 6-month course, we're meeting every other day, every other week, not every other day, every other week for 6 months. And so we're learning from each other in the different things that we're doing to make sure that kind of concrete knowledge of like how to rig, how to do lesson or training plans. But then we're listening to amazing coaches and teachers and professionals in the field. Listening to Tim McLaren for 2 hours that was so impactful for me. And I take what he said to us, I take that to what I do almost every week, and so it's like there's another coach flowing through to Washington College athletes, whether they realize it or not. They're getting Tim McLaren, who obviously had somebody else who had somebody else. So one of the things, as we get deeper and deeper into that professionalization of coaching and coaching education, and being able to give people those basic tools in which then they can create from, I liken it to like strength training, right? When we bring strength trainers in and we look at that, I don't think there's a college in the country who would hire a strength trainer without certifications, right? We wouldn't do that. It wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't be proper. Those are baseline expectations for our strength trainers, because they need to know how to train people safely. And I know that's one of the things that we keep talking about in level 2, when the instructors get together, when we're talking, it's like continuing to look at, are we giving the information that someone who's, daughter is rowing in the juniors and they're looking for another coach and they need somebody to come volunteer and they want to go volunteer, that we're able to give them those tools where they know when they go out on the water that they're keeping the athletes safe, they're keeping themselves safe. And then they have that understanding of how to continue their own education. And that to me is so fundamental in what we're doing.
All right, what's up, everyone? Kevin Leslie, and quick interruption to the podcast to tell you about the At the Thousand Collective. The ATT Collective is an online community for high school rowers who want to better position themselves for long-term success at the college level. And in the collective, you're going to be invited to 2 group coaching Zooms per month, featuring top coaches, elite athletes, rowing experts, where we're going to dive into topics centered around training, rowing performance, college recruiting, personal development, you name it. You're also going to get an opportunity for a live Q&A where you can ask individual questions to help set you on your own path. You're also going to receive a weekly newsletter with erg workouts, core circuits, tips and tricks for rowing and recruiting, and also highlights from any previous Zooms so you can begin to incorporate those into your own practice. Lastly, you're going to get unlimited access to all ATT online courses and programs, most notably the erg First, Row Second online course, where you can begin to do some training at your own pace. So the purpose of this program is to help athletes get the information and guidance to help them take that next step and feel prepared heading into college rowing. So if you're interested in joining, we're offering 50% off your first month. Go to the description below, grab the code, and we hope to see you in the next Zoom. And you'll also receive your first newsletter as soon as this upcoming week. So again, join the community. Let's have some fun. Let's keep pushing and evolving our rowing. And I hope to see you soon. Now back to the show. Peace. I would have to, like, even with that, it's like just obviously here in Philadelphia, and with the nature of what I do, I'm always at the race course. I'm always checking, seeing what's going on in all the boat houses whenever I'm down there and things like that. And I think I was a walk-on in college, where I didn't start rowing until I got to college. My background was I played football and wrestled in high school and a little bit of lacrosse. So obviously I had those kind of coaches to be able to latch onto and learn a little bit from in that process. But then obviously, rowing at the college level, walk on, so on and so forth, a little bit of trial by fire, right? Just kind of jumping in and seeing what happens. And then obviously now being a college coach, like I kind of skipped a lot of that stuff or a lot of coaching that happens at the high school level in the rowing context.
Mm-hmm.
And when you attach not only the sport itself as a high demand, high workload type sport, repetitive sport, but you also attach the logistical side of it, making sure the launches and the boathouses and the infrastructure is set, the budgeting is set. And then also, most importantly, and this is what I liked about the level 3, where you guys led with that, the safety aspect, because unlike any other sport in many ways, right? I guess, every sport has their own things that they are trying to constantly monitor in terms of safety. In rowing, we add it all together, and then we add a body of water underneath that we have to manage and control. So I think one of the things that I learned in the level 3 that I thought was really inspiring was the professionalization of coaching. And you already alluded to it, but making it something where, there are so many rowing programs out there, and also having coaches that are able to at least just have the base level knowledge to understand and handle whatever situations are thrown at them, right? And hopefully none of those safety concerns happen, but obviously there's always the risk. And again, I think that's what makes rowing unique, because we get to be on the body of
Hmm.
water, but also an added layer of risk and challenge that you have to learn how to manage, and then everything else that comes with rowing, so, or coaching the sport of rowing.
Right.
So no, I again, I had a great experience, and I think even the level two, like a lot of athletes or a lot of coaches, can learn from that. And then also like bridging off of that, like you're talking about just the teaching aspect of it in terms of, and not I didn't completely separate from that particular platform to learn
Hmm.
from, right? The level two and level three, but just continuing education as a whole. And I'm sure you have a lot of things that you learned at Navy and through the coaches and sitting in the launch that you are now able to articulate that message and be able to kind of bring it to athletes, right? Deliver that message to athletes in a very powerful way because of the interactions that you have with other coaches. So anyway, I guess what I'm kind of leading around to is like for coaches out there, like get in the launches or do some, extra, continuing education courses, because again, like that's where you not only learn the stuff that you need to know, but also you learn how to transmit it to the athletes or actually, be able to educate them. So, no, I think it's a great, powerful thing. So, but with that, I'd be curious to hear from you, right? So I want to circle back around to the, your, again, like I said, I was a walk on in college. I started
Hmm.
my rowing career in college. And in many ways, when you're a walk on, it's a lot of stress, but it's also a lot of excitement. It's a brand new thing. It's a input output type sport, as like I like to describe it, right? The work you put in, you're going to see it on the other side in some capacity. And that's an eye opening thing to someone who, played other sports in high school and then they landed on rowing and now it's a whole new thing for them. And I wanted to dive into a little bit more about like your approach to developing those athletes, developing the athletes, even anyone on your team, whether they rowed in high school or they started their rowing career here in college. I wanted to dive into a little bit about like what does that process look like for you and your staff, and also just the broader rowing community. How do you get those athletes up to speed to be a 50% contributor to your roster, particularly the ones who just started rowing? But like, what are the points of emphasis that you guys think about, you learn from, and then also how can that be broadened into the greater rowing community? But a little bit of a,
Yeah.
take that any way you
Well, that's
want.
a
But
big question, Kevin. I was like, oh, I
yeah,
don't know if we give it. I don't know if we've given it that much thought. I mean, um, but yeah, I was a walk on. I was a walk on. I was one of those high school athletes that did everything I could. I loved being on a team. I loved being on a team, but I wasn't any good, right? I got all the hustle awards or spirit awards, but I sat the bench and I did a year of college before I went to the academy, and I learned to row there. And because I had read somewhere, it's the 80s, right? So we didn't have the internet. So, but I had read somewhere that you could do this as someone new walking in, and man, it was. I agree with you. It's a repetitive motion sport. It's the closest thing I've ever found that really work in equals work like reward out. There's very few places, I think, and I always just say to my athletes, like, look at me. I'm not that big. I'm not talented, but I know how to work. I'm not afraid to work. I kind of enjoy the work a little bit more than the racing. I leaned into it, and because you do get better. If you work hard, you get better and you get stronger and you can succeed. And I think there seems to be not that many places in life that you find that. And I think for these athletes nowadays, there's more noise in their lives, right? There's a lot more noise and things they have to deal with that we didn't. We got the mail once a day. That was our big excitement. That was our hit of dopamine. And now it's like, we could do that every 15 seconds if we want. And how they balance all of that. And so it's great when you go down to the boathouse, right? And like, let's get really simple with it. When you get on the ergometer, right? Because there's nothing else but you and a machine and maybe some music. And it's what it tells you what you're doing. And I always say it's your best friend. It'll tell you when you're doing well. It'll tell you when you're not doing well. But it's not passing any judgment on you. And I think the athletes that I see really succeed here, and I don't think it's any different anywhere where else, are the ones that find the joy in looking at themselves on a daily basis, and being okay not always being perfect, or being able to really see long-term goals and development, and like that, and I remember we had one athlete come in. She was a novice, and she came in, and you get those emails where they're like, "Coach, can I come in and talk?" And you're like, "Ah, no." And she comes in, she sits down, we've got comfortable chairs, we're always trying to make it so that they love to come into the office. And she closes her eyes and she says, "Well, I don't think this is for me, because I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, or I have to get up at 5." And she said, and I guess I'd probably get up at 5:30 anyways. And I find that I dread the workouts the night before, but then when I get done with the workouts, I feel really good about myself. And she had a few others that were like that. And we looked at her and we're like, "Hey, I'm really sorry to tell you, but you are so a rower, right? This is who you are." And she said, "Okay." And she walked away. And that was that. And she was a four-year athlete who competed at the NCAA's 4 years, consecutive years, like, right, had no idea she was a rower. But touching base with her even this past weekend when she came back, you could see so many of those same qualities in what she's doing now, and how she's looking forward in to the next few steps of her journey, and how much it relates to rowing. So I think that's so much of what I do as a coach. Is when I look at athletes, especially walk-on athletes, I see myself, right? And I see a lost freshman who doesn't know which way is up and doesn't know what they can do. And I really try to continue to put forth a path that they will follow, knowing that if they just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I think Greg Hartsuff, to me, I think we look at this in level 3, but he had an excellent like treatise, or like how you hook athletes, walk-ons, and how you just kind of slowly bring them in, so you don't overwhelm them. But before they know it, they're hooked, and they don't want to do anything else but this. And I think that's what we look at. But again, it goes back to look at if we look at the coaching staff that we have here at Washington College. And I like to say I like to collect coaches. If somebody moves in the area and they've got some kind of experience and some kind of interest, I'm pulling them in. And we have probably on our staff, probably everyone is taught at some level at least once, and some are just full-time teachers, and whenever they have time in their schedule, they're in. But they have a passion for the sport. They have a passion for working with young people. And I think that's what comes through to our athletes, even the ones that don't continue on. We'll see them on campus. The joke at Washington College is you're either, and this is not for the recruited, like other sports, because we do have lots of other sports. I don't want to let anyone think that. But if you're not currently a rower, you have been a rower at some point, rower or coxswain. And we have a lot of people try us out. It's not for everybody. But I think they tend to be our biggest advocates on campus when the new class comes on. Like, "Hey, this wasn't for me, but you'll love it down there. Go try it out."
Yeah, and that's I think like, and a couple of things that I want to allude, like again, like the power, like the I always say, like when you have a walk on, like the wide eyed, like they walk in, everything's new to them, right? And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that they can latch onto is the erg, because you take out all the other variable factors that go into the sport of rowing. Like it's this objective feedback tool that tells you your productivity on every single stroke. And I think like that's something that I latched onto when I was starting out. I was like, "Oh, this is very cool. I started down here, but now I'm slowly, working my way up." And you alluded to it before, and before I even get to that, but I always say, like, what attracted me is I was more attracted to the training, and you actually said this too. It's just what made me think of it. It's like the training is what I was mainly attracted to with the sport.
Hmm.
The outlet, the physical outlet, the hard work, the early mornings, the all that stuff is what attracted me to the sport. And then the rowing kind of fit its way into now they're working in parallel with one another and in alignment with one another, and you love both of them. And you mentioned this before, but you said that in your boathouse, the erg room is your favorite room. Um, Unpack that for us. Tell us a little bit about why that is. And again, like, you
Yeah.
know, we are a sport that is about the performances that you do on the water, but the erg is a massive component to what, what we can
Yep.
get out of the water, right? So unpack that for us. Why is the erg room your favorite room in the boathouse? And more importantly, where do you see its value in the development of your athletes?
Yeah. For me, I think it's really the mental part of it. We definitely can track the progress, right, as people get better, and you can see it, right, and it's just numbers, and it's like the one place where we can really quantify if we're not rowing singles. But even rowing singles, right, it's windy or the current or this or that. But the erg is stationary. We have climate control, right, so that's air conditioned. They're comfortable as much as you can be erging. Um, but I know for me, the one of the biggest things I got out of my journey in rowing in the training part was the understanding of how powerful my mind is in determining what was going to happen next. I started out as one of those people that would maybe talk myself down and talk situations down. I think probably so that, set the bar low and I won't be that disappointed if I don't make it. And it was through my interactions with coaches in the sport that I really started to get into the understanding of like what I could do if I really worked at the mental aspect. And I always say it was that knowledge and that practice with really good coaches that was the biggest contributor to my like success of making the team, right? Like that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make the team, and it was only because of that I was successful. And I for me, the ergometer is that place where it's like it's just you. It's the single, but even less. And when you get to that moment on the ergometer, when you're having that conversation with yourself of do I or don't I, do I or don't I, that is the place where that is practiced. And coming from a person who more often than not said, no, I don't, but learning through that and then being able to take that to all the other facets of my life. Um, Talking about my Navy experience, I think the ergometer to me is plebe summer, and plebe summer was the hardest thing I'd ever done, hands down, as far as like grinding it out and trying to survive and trying to figure myself out. And between plebe summer and the ergometer, that has set up, I think that is the foundation of any success that I've had in any part of my life. It's just that understanding of how to really, really believe in yourself in such a way that we used to, like my coach would say to me, right, you have to talk like a champion to be a champion. Because if you talk like a champion, you'll start to see yourself that way. And if you see yourself that way, you'll start doing the things that champions do, right? You won't, you'll go to bed early because your training is coming in the next morning, and that's what you do because you see yourself. So if you can't see yourself there, how do you ever expect to like do all those things to get yourself there? And that has been something that's been so instrumental for me, especially in the hard parts of my life, to really look and see where I want to be and to continue acting as if, knowing that the more I do that and add the work to it, that I'll get there.
And that's I love like even you just kick things off with just the mental side of it. Like it's like, hey, like the numbers that are generated, so on and so forth, are like at the end of the day, like if you really strip it down to what it is at its core, it's a test of on every session, right? It's on every session, right? Every opportunity, even if it's lower intensity, higher intensity, you name it. It's a test of your ability to, can you overcome this? Can you push through? Can you get to that next phase
Yep.
of today's challenge? No, I think that's a great way to like also help athletes wrap their mind around its value. Because I think that's something that's very often misunderstood. Where it's like, hey, like I just want to be on the water. I just, it's like
Right.
no one likes the erg, which I don't believe in. I think that a lot of people who do love it, they love it because they understand or they appreciate its value. Um,
Hmm.
so no, I think that's a very powerful way to kind of describe it. It's like, hey, like this is testing, you on the from the mental standpoint to be able to overcome challenge. Um, and with that, talk to me a little bit about like, okay, so just when we bring it back to, and one of the things that we talked about in, when we were exchanging a few emails, we talked a little bit about just the development of athletes, the focus on, and you can take this where this is something that I'm very passionate about, but it's like, hey, like, and this is why I wanted to bring up the walk-ons and athletes that you have starting from scratch, in their rowing career, right? Not their athletic career necessarily, but their rowing career. And obviously you're also someone who it has direct exposure to hundreds of rowing coaches out there, through the education, through the USRowing, level 2 and level 3. But talk to me a little bit about like, okay, like the importance of long-term development. And this is one of my favorite, this part of the level 3 stuff. Like one of my favorite lessons was when we dove specifically into that. Like, because that's something that I'm very passionate about, coming from a walk-on background, and why I still perform and love being a part of the sport to this day, was because, again, like there's a lot of that development that was more focused on being able to do this as a sport for life. But talk a little bit about like just long-term athletic development, where you see it being a focal point in your own personal, philosophy with coaching, but also where you feel like it might be directed in the high school rowing
Hmm.
world and the college rowing world and beyond. But talk to me a little bit about that and the development of athletes.
Yeah. No, and Kevin, that was great. I was so excited when you had brought that up. That's one of my favorite parts of level 3. I can sit and listen to Chris Chase forever, right? But when you look even like for Chris, where he came from with Saratoga, and you could look at a juniors program, where their commitment is to that development of the athlete, not necessarily because I don't want to speak for them, but my impression is it's not to make Saratoga the fastest juniors club. It's to put forth these athletes that will take it to the next level that they want to take it. And you look at college, and you look at those athletes performing in college, and then of course beyond. I know for us at Washington College, one of the things that is really important to us that we realized was a great metric for us, like, are we doing what we want to be doing here, is how many of our athletes go on to be coaches. And it's great, and it's like right after graduation they'll start going back to their programs. And I had a recruit once ask me that question. I think that's what kind of keyed us into, we should be looking at this, like, we must have a lot of people out there that are coaching, because like you talked to, do we do a good job of either igniting the passion for what we're doing, or when we get those athletes from programs where the passion is already ignited, are we able to continue and further them to that? Because, right, like, it's like wildfire. Like when we think about what we can do through sport or through rowing, and then that gets into all of our DEI, like how far can we spread all the great things that we've gotten out of the sport and from our coaches, and give that forward. And again, when we look at coaches and we start talking about some of those like great coaches, we're really talking about how they're teaching, and the impact that they've had on people. And you see the flow of who they are and what they've taught, and you see that flow through so many people and just go out. And it's an amazing possibility, which to me makes it so exciting to be a coach. Like, you're touching people who are going to touch people who are going to touch people. And there's not a lot of I don't think there's a lot of professions outside of teaching. I mean, maybe there are that you get that and you have that ability to really um, affect somebody's life in a positive way. And so, I look at that. I know I just finished, or I'm trying to finish. I guess I should say I'm trying to finish Katie Ledecky's book, Just Add Water. But what really struck me is how often she alluded to her coaches being very, very mindful of long-term athlete development. Because she talked about they could have done this, they could have done that, but that she was trained in such a way uh, to make sure she had the fundamentals and that she was at an appropriate level of training so that she could move to the next level of training. And I think the thing that I watch a little bit, I think we were a sport, right, where people came into it at the college level for the most part. There were some high schools, but not that many high schools. Now there's a lot of high schools, which is great. And there's a lot of juniors programs. But kind of like when you look at sport with kids, right? When it's like when my daughter was 3, I started feeling behind for her with soccer. I was like, oh no, she's behind. With rowing, we don't have to worry about that. There are no 3-year-olds rowing yet, but it's getting younger and younger and younger. And then watching the recruits that come through our office sometimes not even getting a driver's license because they're not allowed to take time off of practice, to do that. And it always makes me wonder, like, is that going to be the pathway for that child to become a coach or to be a master's rower or to achieve what they want to achieve in college? You know, are we being mindful enough to make sure that we all understand what the goal is with rowing, and then kind of like we do our training plans and work backwards. And I think sometimes we're working forward without that idea. Um, and so when I find athletes that come from programs, like people, recruits will ask, what are your ERG standards? I don't have ERG standards, right? Like I'm talking to you as a recruit. I want to know, are you competitive? Do you, I don't want to say, do you love what you do? It's always like people are like, well, I don't know if I love doing that, but is this who you are? Do you want to take this to the next level? And I don't care where you are in the ERG. Maybe you're in a program that doesn't have ERGs or is really working on developing maybe the fundamentals, and you're running a lot and you're doing those things and working on like whole body athleticism. I can put you through a program, right? That will take you in 4 years, and you will be better leaving the program than you were coming in. I can do that, but it's hard if you get an athlete who still wants to do it, but either their bodies are broken, right? And we see that like in baseball, right? The Tommy John surgeries that happen nowadays, to these kids who are throwing lots and lots of balls. But it's harder if we get athletes who have really been through a very, very demanding juniors. I love people that row in the spring. I love those programs. We row in the spring. I mean, if people want to row in the fall as they get older, have at it. But if they come in and they're cross country runners, they're hockey players, they're soccer players, they've done all these different things and they still want to come explore rowing, it's like, that's great. And I think in high school to get that balance, that's great. Like we used to applaud 4-sport athletes, and now it's really hard for some kids to be 4-sport athletes because sometimes they're being told, hey, if you don't do this year round, you're not going to be able to be successful. And I disagree with that. I want people to do things, and I can get pretty passionate about it. So because again, I just feel that that's what we have to, as we're raising children in our families, we're thinking about the adult they're going to become, and we tailor our decisions to that. We really need to do that on all levels of of sport. What are we trying to do, and what's the best practice in doing that?
Yeah. And I have to dive in because this is an area that I love talking about as well. And like I've alluded to a couple times, like and you're the same way. Like neither of us rode, before we set foot on a college campus, and it like now that I am on the other side of the table, right? Having been a college coach for a number of years, and now that I work mostly with high school athletes who are, trying to maximize their high school career, but also take it to the college level, like it, it's to me like when you have parents and athletes talking as eighth and ninth and even 10th graders about what is the 2K I need to be able to get into this or be able to be in this boat or this and that. Like that's something that I am very passionate about as well, because it's like in many ways, I feel like you are in pursuit of that target number, and the 2K is the one that we all talk about the most because that's the number that we're constantly asking for on the recruiting front, number that selection is based off of at a lot of programs for their high school program. But to me, when you are in constant pursuit of lowering that score in while also sacrificing the development, the fundamentals, the actual quality of your strokes, and also the passion for the sport, right? Because all you're thinking about is getting to that next goal for this one particular number. Again, like one of the things that I I constantly hear from athletes is, hey, like I'm a ninth grader, I want to lower my 2K. Like this is their passion for rowing or their perceived passion for rowing is being led by this number, or that's the number that they're hearing about at the boathouse. All their friends are talking about when they do get to college level. That's all they're hearing about. And again, as someone who didn't do their first 2K until they're almost 20 years old, like, and still fell in love with sport and happened to make it a career. And there are so
Yeah.
many examples of athletes who have done well beyond anything that I've aspired to do on the athletic front, who literally didn't do a 2K until they're 19 years old, 20 years old. People who have gone off and raced at the Olympics and won the Olympics in past cycles. Like, talk to me a little bit about like your thoughts on like high school athletes and their development and their kind of just early on in this pursuit of having rowing be a focal point of their high school career, but also where they may, or where parents can even kind of, have a conversation, where it's like, is that what they should be focusing on? What also should be focused on? Should they have this diversity of sports that they are also playing? Like, talk to me a little bit about that, because again, that's what I hear on my end. It's like, hey, like there's
Hmm.
this constant focus on driving that number down as low as you can, because that's what we hang our hat on at the boathouse and what the coaches talk to us about if we do want to go to college. Like, go a little bit deeper into that if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, one of the things I see from our recruits coming in, for some, the number is so important and it becomes bigger than it is. And it becomes a roadblock, right? And I know when I get together with other coaches, we talk about that, like the 2K roadblock, and how do we get past that, and how do we do this, and how do we do that? And then, just recognizing that, especially for our young folk, right? Like they, like you said, that's our currency, right? So they wanna be able to be with everybody else, and some people are better on ergs than others, and then we could go into the whole thing about, like you said, like we love the erg for a lot of the things it does, but I know that the top 8 ergs on my team are not the 8 people that are going to make the boat move the fastest, right? There's all those other intangibles, because if it was, we would probably be out of a job, right? It would be easy to just boom, 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 throw them out, let them go. But there's that beauty of what it is to move a boat. And so sometimes I feel like I'm doing a lot of work kind of untangling that with some of my athletes, where maybe it wasn't the most positive environment. I think the number is great when we realize that it's a manifestation, it's a data point of what we're putting in, and that success is not linear. And I always say your journey is not linear. And I think that was one of the more impactful things I had heard somebody say. It's like, you never fall off your path. You might have thought your path was going that way, but it really was always going that way. But you always are on your path. And we use that a lot with our athletes for the earth. On a given day, you might not be where you thought you should be, but you just have to take that as a data point of that's where I am this moment. And so what do I do with that? And I think that's the biggest, kind of the biggest thing we keep trying to put to our young people is, because everybody's got a different point, but we can teach and work with people pretty similarly on what you do with it next. What's your next step? And then again, looking back at like high school and in any way, I mean, I think we can look at it on the academic level too. Like, my goodness, I know I worked hard in high school, but I see what some kids are doing. I was like, I never worked that hard. I was doing other things. Are we continuing to give our young people that understanding that life is a journey and not a destination, right? Because I think we're hardwired for destinations. So sometimes I'll catch myself like, and I go, wait a minute, there is no end. I mean, there's an end point, but it's not like I win or I lose. It's the body of your work, right? And that's what we keep trying to give to our athletes, especially the recruited athletes. Hey, you're not the sum of, you're not your last erg. You're not great because you had a great last erg, and you're not terrible because you had a terrible last erg. You are the sum of the body of your work. As an athlete, what have you been doing? Do you show up every day? Are you a good teammate? Look at your data. But then you take that into life, right? We're not the worst thing we've ever done, and we're not the best thing we've ever done. We are the sum of all that we have done. And so every day is a new day. Every day is a chance to do what you want to do, to get better, to learn something. We teach people how to frame things. Even looking at our facilities, we have this brand new boathouse from 2018. Our athletes that used to have their locker room was a bathroom. And when you became an upper class, you got a hook on the wall. There weren't enough hooks for everybody. And now we have lockers for everybody. We have this beautiful boathouse, but I used to grouse around because I wanted the boats to come into the boathouse. I wanted to have 2 levels. I wanted all of that. And they decided not to. I just focused on what we didn't have. And we had a recruit come down for the men's team, and he stood in the parking lot and he looked to his left at the shell house, and he looked to his right at the boathouse, our athletes' boathouse. And he said, wow, you guys have 2 boathouses. And I thought, wow, we have 2 boathouses. It's all how you frame and what you do with it after that. And I think looking at sport and looking at juniors rowing, right? It should still be fun. It should be fun on the college level, right? You have lofty goals, but at some level, there's got to be an element of enjoyment. It looks different for everybody, but I think as coaches, then that's what we're really tasked to do, is to draw this diverse group, figure out what that looks like, and keep working to try to be what they need when they need it, where they are, which is exhausting, right?
Yeah, and I think no, and I think that's a good perspective, because I think like even working with high school athletes, or seeing like, it's like, again, like I was a college coach, and I understand the value of the 2K, and I'm an erg coach also. Like, that's my favorite part of this. Like, one of my favorite parts of the sport of rowing is teaching athletes how to maximize what they do on the erg, and get be able to put themselves in a position where they can maximize their performances. And so the value is without question there. And I think one of the things that I always notice is, or can notice, is athletes that only are in pursuit of that, and all their life is rowing. It's fall, winter, spring, and probably even a summer program. When you go and you ask that athlete to perform a basic squat or a basic push-up, or to hold a plank for 1 minute, and they struggle to be able to do these fundamental elements of being an athlete, not just a rower. I think that's one of the things that I'm always, just it takes me, or it used to take me back. Now I'm kind of I'm used to it now, but like, I used to be like, whoa, like, these are things that, growing up playing other sports, whether it was soccer, baseball, wrestling, football, whatever it may be, right? Like, you learn these fundamental movements that I think in many ways, when you do attach it to rowing, when whether it's later on in your high school career, because you have this backlog of athletic versatility, to kind of, draw on. And then also for walk-on athletes that you work with, that I've worked with, like when they attach it to rowing at the college level, they have all these skill sets and experiences that they can now use as a launching pad of not only rowing success, but more importantly, passion, where it's like, whoa,
Hmm.
like now I'm taking all those things that I had from high school. And they don't know this, but now I'm taking all those things I had from high school, and I am competitive, if not beating some of the people who only specialized in sport of rowing. So, and I guess my last question on that piece for you is like, where is that, like, is just strength training or a diversity of, movement and things like that, like, obviously with the erg and with those, what you do on the water, like, is that something that you feel like is something that could find its place, or should find its place in the high school and college rowing circles? Is that something that, like, again, athletic
Yeah.
movement in general, like, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because I was doing the training plan for Saturday, working on it, and we've been incorporating a lot more running, right? And I think, again, right, once we got ergs, we went, oh, we can do all this. It's the same motion. It's the same motion. This is great. But I know you're younger than me. I grew up. We had a Model A when I first joined at Navy, and we got a few more Model Bs, I think, eventually. But we ran hills in the cemetery. That's what we did. Um, and I think there's such value when you look at our sport where we're sitting down. When we sit down to do our sport, we don't have that opportunity to move our bodies, and to have to be responsible for moving our bodies from point A to point B all by ourselves. And there's so much benefit to getting people to make those different movements in support of the movements we're asking them to. And I think it's definitely the movement. I completely agree with you. I do think that sometimes we become rowers because we don't move well. So I think that's really even more reason to continue bringing that aspect into the sport, to add that diversity of what we're doing. But when we look at it, like when we talk diversity of it, right? My mother used to say, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket," right? So even when we have recruited athletes come in, sometimes they room with each other. We always advocate, go room with somebody you don't know, get involved in things that you don't know, because sometimes things don't go well at the boathouse. Sometimes things don't go well in class. You have to have all those different parts of you that will hold you up during times when other parts aren't going so well, and actually make you stronger because of it. But as soon as you started talking, Kevin, about working with those athletes that were just that one movement and lacking so many of the supporting things that eventually they need and will make them better, right? We can just really pull that out to all different parts of life. But yeah, the sport, I think, and when we talk about our juniors, right, that's the time we get fundamental with them. And I will say, I think one of the things I really like the trend, we don't get people who come in and go, I'm a port or I'm a starboard. And I think we used to see that years ago, that people would specialize, right? And then especially at those young ages, and I would advocate sculling, right? Because we can add that level of unilateral. I'm not big on my terms, but right, where we're getting more straight line motion with our kids as they're growing. But yeah, I think the more we can bring in diversity of movement, the better off they're going to be as athletes.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that could be a whole nother podcast and maybe a part two down the road, because that's something that I love chatting about. And I think it's just, something that I think is, should be broadcasted to more and
Hmm.
more, athletes and coaches out there. And again, not to say like you shouldn't have your lofty goals of going to the school that you want and making your scores as low as you possibly can, but also to make sure that you have a little bit of balance, athletic balance in your life, just like you talked about with,
That's a great, yeah, balance.
yeah. So it's like, because again, like that's what's going to help you not only when you get there, be able to sustain it for a long period of time, whether it's in your 4 years and beyond. So,
Yeah.
no, I love that. And so, Kari, so before we wrap up here, I just want to kind of I got a couple more, last little things for you. I know you got, the, what, the rest of the week to finish off. But with speaking more generally, right? Because there's so many ways that I could take this, right? You have a wealth of information, and I think another part two of a podcast could be down the line where we dive purely into the coaching education phase, piece of just how can we, continue to help evolve the knowledge that coaches are, have at their disposal. But we'll keep it more centered around success at the college level. So my final question before we get into a little bit of closing, but it's like, what do you feel like are things that make or help athletes be successful at the college level, whether that is specifically with a D3 program where they have a little bit of that balance, or they are, seeking to row at a D1 program or whatever it may be. Like, what questions should they be asking themselves at this level? Like, what are things that they can start to incorporate as freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors that can help better set them up for success? Let's kind of close things out
Yeah.
with that question. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that you said the questions that they should be asking themselves, right? Because I think a lot of times people like concentrate on the questions that they're asking, programs or other athletes or things like that. But I I really believe that the success comes from being in the right place for you, not for your parents or for your best friend or what other people around you consider to be the school, right? There's so many different schools, there's so many different programs. Uh, Being able to find out who you are, and as much as any of us can, and especially at 16, but know what you want, and then I think asking that deeper question of why do I want that? Because I think if you can answer those questions, this is what I want, this is why I want it. Well, then, yeah, that's yours. If you say it and then you don't really know why you want it, well, maybe it's somebody else's that you're taking on as yours. We'll get my brother. My brother's a great guy. He's an engineer, so he thinks very linear. You know what I mean? Thinks in a linear fashion, and so we have success here, right? We're going to the NCAA. It's great. It's such an honor to be able to go and hang out with those coaches and compete with those programs on a national stage. And he said to me, "So when do you move up?" And I was like, well, "What do you mean? When do I move up? When do you move to a G1?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I think I'm here. I think this is where I am." He's like, "Yeah, but you're successful, so you must move to the next level." And I think that's how sometimes we see things, right, as the next level. And it's interesting. There's just different things that you can choose for yourself, right? I mean, obviously, and I always like to put this plug in, you have to get the school to fit right. And to really fit, not the name of the school, but the school to fit, because you think you're going to row or coxswain for 4 years, but there might be an injury, there might be something, and this is the place you're from for the rest of your life. So make sure that fit. And then you look at the different flavors, like Davenport, we call them the flavors of rowing. And a D1, a really high level D1 is great for the right person, right? It is great for that person who has what it takes to survive in it and thrive in it. It's so interesting working on the D3 level, which I really didn't have any experience in. I was in rowing when we weren't even an NCAA sport, and I don't think Navy ever really knew what they were for a long time in all the sports. But we get athletes that come in and they're very definitive. The ones that really have asked those questions, they know what they want. They want to have a really competitive experience. They want to be part of a team. They want to have a great team culture. That's a huge one, right? That's where you're spending your time. But they don't want that to be the defining moment of their college. And they know that, right? And so you see these athletes, and you see the athletes here at Washington College. You see them at the teams that are winning the NCAA, right? And the speed they're able to do and the level they're able to achieve. But those are the athletes that know what it was they were looking for. And so they're successful in it. So I just think that's the biggest thing, is really understanding your why. And then that can help. And then there's so many people out there like yourself, other coaches, different different people that can help you take your why and find the right fits for that why.
I love that. I love that was that's a perfect way to close things out. Because again, like I think at the end of the day, we put ourselves in the shoes of the athletes who are aspiring to you know leverage rowing as an integral piece of what they do. As a person, like that's at the end of the day, like we attach rowing to ourselves, and at what level is through you learn that through conversations, education, and figuring out what the best fit for you is. So no, Kari, this was a blast. I think again, like there's so many things that I'd love to have you on again at a later date. It's a busy fall, so obviously, I'll let you kind of focus on racing season and all that fun stuff. But again, like from coaching education, long-term athlete development, from just the even just with helping athletes through finding their fit, on the college recruiting front, like there's so many things that we could dive into. So last bit for you is any last things for athletes who are maybe expressing some interest in rowing at the D3 level, and in particular Washington College? Any way that we can help support you and the team, and websites and all that? Like, let's close things out with a little bit of that, if you don't mind. And then also what's in the foreseeable future coming up besides the head of Charles? Let's cap off with that.
Yeah, I think you don't get anyone who's interested in rowing at the next level, right? Coming up into the college, and obviously D3, Washington College in particular. You have such a wealth of information out on the internet, and then asking the questions to find the answers that you need. And I think dealing with coaches that I do, it's such an exciting time to be in the coaching world, because everyone I've come across wants to share what they know and what they do. And that trickles down to the athletes that they're recruiting. Nobody's looking to pretend to be something they're not, to really go in and ask those questions, and see what we have. To plug Washington College, which I love to do. We've got the best water of anybody, and I just say that I've coached on a lot of water. I've rowed on a lot of water. It's great to be out there in flat water with bald eagles, and it's hard to get any better than that. We were lining up for our first 15-minute piece today, and I had them all look over their right shoulder, because you could see off on the tree line the sun coming up, and it was just at that right angle where you could really see the movement, and it was a beautiful orange red sun, and you got to stop and take those moments, right, when they come, and appreciate what you've got and what you're doing. But anyone looking at programs, if you can do it, you need to go visit those programs, and you need to go be with the people. The coaches are great, but we kind of come and go a little bit. You'll know when you step on the campus, when you work with you hang out with the team, are these your people? And that's what we tell anyone that comes to visit us. Come and be with our athletes. If they're your people, let's keep talking. If they're just not your people, hey, anything you need as you continue to look, because we're all looking for people to find the right fit. And just continuing on, with education and all that, and like what you do, Kevin. I was so excited when you asked me to do this, because what's better than to spend an hour or 2 hours talking about what we're passionate about, but thinking about our journey that got us to where we're so passionate about this still, and looking to share that. So I really appreciate, and anytime you want me back on, just let me know. I'd love to jump back on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also I'll last thing, I'll definitely be reaching out at some point, to come ride the launch and experience that sunrise. That is, you painted a perfect picture there. And then also, I'll be up in Boston, so I'll make sure to, to find you in person, and connect up there for a few minutes while you're juggling all the craziness that comes with being up at the head of Charles. But Kari, this was awesome. I had a blast. Very fun. And again, a part 2 is definitely in order down the line. So again, thank you so much for coming on. That's great. And good luck as you guys kick off the fall.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Appreciate it.